Welcome to the virtual meeting of the Service Delivery Committee. It's 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 9th of March, 2021. My name is Councillor Bill Bolter. I'm the chair of this committee. My fellow councillor, Councillor Samuel Hack, is the vice chair. In accordance with the regulations made under Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this remote meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The audio-visual recording will be made available to the council's website and YouTube channel shortly after the meeting. All meeting participants are reminded to speak slowly and clearly in the direction of the devices, microphones at all times. Reminder that mobile phones and other electronic devices should be turned off or put on silent mode. And those participating in the meeting should refrain from taking phone calls. For the purpose of recording of attendance, I confirm the following councillors are present or participating in this remote meeting: Rosemary Adams, Naveed Allen, Lee Bentley, myself, Bill Bolter, John Boyce, Michael Charlesworth, Kel Gocher, the Vice Chair Samuel Hack, Amandeep Kerr, Kevin Lloydell, Richard Morris. Officers in attendance is Samuel Ball, Assistant Solicitor, is acting as Democratic Service Officer, Emily Bryan, Admin Assistant, who is shadowing Democratic Service Officer, Philippa Fisher, Head of Customer Service and Transformation, David Gill, Head of Law, Democracy and Monitoring Officer, Stephen Hines, Deputy Chief Executive and Section 1 Officer, Avril Lennox, Head of Community and Wellbeing, Adrian Thorpe, Head of Built Environment. For the purpose of regulations, I confirm that before the meeting went live, all participants confirm they can see and hear all participants. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the Council's adopted remote meeting procedure rules, a summary of which is attached to tonight's agenda for reference. May I also politely remind all participants that they must not act in a disorderly or disruptive manner or otherwise interfere with the committee's proper conduct of its business. Thank you.
Chair, may I just clarify, Councillor Gottaraya has not connected to the meeting, and Mr. Gill and Mr. Hines are sharing one device because Mr. Hines is having technical difficulties with his own. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Apologies for absence then, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Mrs. Linda Boardley, Frank Boardley, David Carter and Sharon Morris.
Thank you. No substitutes?
No substitutes, Chair.
Declaration of interest. Members are reminded that any declaration of interest should be made having regard to the members' code of conduct. In particular, members must make clear the nature of their interest, which is pecuniary or non-pecuniary. I wish to declare an interest in item 5.5 on page 20, where a grant was given to the Framework Museum, of which I'm a trustee. But I spoke to Mr. Gill. I need to declare any other interest other than that. Anybody else any other interest to declare?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay. Minutes of previous meeting. Reconfirm and sign the minutes of previous meeting in accordance with Rule 19, Part 4 of the Constitution. All in favour of that? All agree?
No objections or hands raised, Chair.
Action list arising from the previous meeting. To reconfirm and note the action list arising from the previous meeting on page 8. Any comments on that?
Again, no hands raised, Chair.
Okay. We move now to petitions and deputations. I don't think there is any, is there? No
petitions and deputations, Chair.
Right, notice of notice, motions on notice. The first one is 7A, fireworks. Mr. Lloydell, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Without further ado, I'd like to move that this committee resolves, 1, to require all public firework displays within the local authority boundaries to be advertised in advance of the event, allowing residents to take precautions for their animals and vulnerable people. 2, to actively promote a public awareness campaign about the impact of fireworks on animal welfare and vulnerable people. including the precautions that can be taken to mitigate the risk. 3, to write to the government urging them to introduce legislation to limit the maximum noise level of fireworks to 90 dB for those sold to the public for the private displays. And finally, 4, to encourage local suppliers of fireworks to stock quieter fireworks for the public display. I reserve my comments. Thank you, Chair.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
Any other speakers at all?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay. So report to the vote then, do we, as being a motion accepted by the council? How are we going to indicate that, Mr. Ball?
We will
Can
do sorry, Councillor Lloydall.
So reserve the comments. Can I make a comment? Do you mind?
Good, certainly, yes. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And the reasons for this is that we've had contact with the members of the public. Members of the public have contacted us, asking us if we could do something about the fireworks. I did some research yesterday and today. I was also interviewed by the radio this morning with regards to this particular notice of motion. My research from memory was that last year, about this time last year, we raised this issue under the Community Safety Partnership, working with the fire service, so that we can perhaps, before the firework season starts, we could put stuff out, leaflets out to suggest to people or advise them on what they can and can't do, or to help mitigate the problems associated with animals and vulnerable people. Sadly, we weren't able to fulfil that because of obvious reasons through the year. As you know, lockdown and everything prevented us from doing it. So I'm pleased to announce that that will now, from an action point of view, we'll get this back on the Community Safety Partnership. And from a promote public awareness, there is an already, I've got it here, but I won't bore you with it. I've already got a leaflet which is produced by the RSPCA, Fireworks, Frighten Animals, etc. Brilliant leaflet, which we can then talk about later in the year when and when we're allowed, we can actually put that out to residents. So there is a bit of an action plan already that we can promote awareness of this particular motion, and I think there's a positive way forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. Are we all in favour of that motion?
Chair, if I may, take a recorded style vote. Okay. So if members can indicate if they're voting for, against or abstain, and we'll start with Councillor Adams. Could you unmute Councillor Adams?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Allen?
For.
Councillor Bentley?
For.
Councillor Bolter?
For.
Councillor Boyce?
For.
Councillor Charlesworth?
For.
Councillor Hack?
For.
Councillor Lloydall?
For.
Councillor Morris?
For.
That's unanimous in favour, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to the second motion about sky lanterns and helium balloons. This committee resolves to ban the use and release of sky lanterns and helium balloons meant for release on council-owned public open space. To discourage the release of sky lanterns and helium balloons at any event licensed by Oakham and Wixton Borough Council, and request third parties who lease council property to observe the ban on balloons and sky lantern releases. Delegate authority to the head of law and governance in consultation with the chair and vice chair of the Policy, Finance and Development Committee to make any consequential changes to council policies and agreements in relation to the use of council land as a result of this motion. To promote to local people, leading to a better understanding of the damage sky lanterns and helium balloons can do. I shall move that motion formally. If I have a seconder.
I'll have a second that, Chairman.
Okay. Any other speakers before I start again?
No other hands raised, Chair.
Yeah. These devices have a very big impact on wildlife, and of course, in certain circumstances, can cause fires. When the sky lanterns come down, they can cause fires and cause danger to other animals and to property. The biggest problem is, of course, they don't degrade. So when they come down, the balloons just lay there for many, many years. In fact, could be actually centuries. So we're looking to the environment to ban these to make things a lot safer for our wildlife and also to protect other people and property within the area. I hope that motion goes through, and I'm sure that Mr. Lloyd can actually help us with the same reason as his on the balloons as well, so that we can all work together.
No problem, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. All you in favour?
Chair, I will do another recorded style vote if that's okay. Again, for, against or abstain, and we'll start again with Councillor Adams,
4.
Councillor Allen,
4.
Councillor Bentley,
4.
Councillor Bolter,
4.
Councillor Boyce,
4.
Councillor Charlesworth,
4.
Councillor Hack,
4.
Councillor Lloydall,
4.
and Councillor Morris.
4.
Once again, that's unanimous in favour, Chair.
Thank you, everybody. We move now to item 8, council performance update. Mrs. Fisher, for that, please. That's on page 11.
Thank you, Chair. If I start off by saying there are 98 performance indicators for our corporate plan objectives, and these are categorised by each objectives and service delivery arm. Each target has been graded using a red, amber and green status ranking system, but it's important to note that there are 2 other ranks, a blue ranking, and this is for indicators where work has yet to begin, and a white ranking system where they are outside of the control of the council for delivery. So, for example, the COVID pandemic and the significant impact that has had on some of the ability to deliver our KPIs. Out of the 98 indicators this quarter, 79 were due for reporting as at the end of quarter 3. Of the 98, 63 were green status, 11 were amber status, and 5 were red status. This equates to 80% of the green, 14% amber, and 6% red status. If I can ask members to move to point 2, corporate performance. The following report provides an analysis and statistics on the performance of the indicators used to monitor our progress against the council's new corporate objectives. There are 3 main objectives, that is building, protecting and empowering communities, growing the borough economically, and effective service provision. If I can now move to page 13 and point 2.4. If I can refer members now to look at the corporate, the performance table by corporate objective, I'll take you through the specific percentages and the number of key indicators of green, amber and red. So as already mentioned, our overall performance, 63 indicators were green with a percentage of 80%. Our number of indicators for amber were 11 with a percentage of 14%. And for red, our number of indicators were 5 with a percentage of 6%. If we break those down to our corporate priorities, building, protecting and empowering communities, green again, 22 indicators with 88%, amber 1 with 4%, and then red 2 indicators with 8%. Growing the borough economically, 10 green indicators at 71%, amber 4 indicators at 29%, and then the number of red indicators was 0, so 0%. Providing excellent service, 31 of these were green with a percentage of 78, 6 were amber with a percentage of 15%, and 3 were red with a percentage of 7%. If we now move to the performance table by service delivery chart 2, if I can move to each specific service area. So the built environment, the number of green indicators was 19 with a percentage of 82%. The amber was 2 with a percentage of 9%, and the red indicators was 2 with a 9%. Community and wellbeing, 20 green indicators with a percentage of 95%, 1 amber indicator with 5%, and 0 percentage on red indicators. Customer service and transformation, 8 indicators were green, which is 100%. There are no ambers and no reds. Finance and resource, 8 were green, 54%, 5 were amber, equating to 33%, and 2 were red, equating to 13%. For law and democracy, 8 had green indicators, 67%, 3 were amber at 25%, and 1 red indicator at 8%. Chair, are you happy now to move over to each individual head of service so that we can have an update from them specifically?
Yes, but I think Mr. Bentley wants to ask a question.
Perfect.
Mr. Bentley, you want to ask a question on that first part?
I'll wait a minute. I'll ask a question
Okay.
in a bit, please.
Okay, so we move on now to page 14.
Chair,
Sorry, Chair.
Councillor Hack has her hand raised also.
Okay. Mrs. Hack?
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, could I ask Mrs. Fisher to tell us how does this compare to the last quarter? I would like to get a picture of which departments, does it alternate which are in red and amber, and those that were in amber, are they green now? So I just wanted to get a picture of how we're doing compared to last quarter.
Councillor Hack, I can give you the overall corporate objective breakdown. So previous quarter was 80% green, 18% amber and 2% red. So in this quarter it's 80% green, 14% amber and 6% red. So the red status and indicators have slightly gone up this quarter.
Okay, thank you. And is there any service area that is consistently in red? Would you know?
I think to be fair, dependent on the key performance indicator and the fact that they're reviewed on a quarterly basis, key performance indicators will drop in and out of red and amber on occasion, which therefore picks them up and down. Is there any one particular service area? I would say no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, Mr. Thorpe now, I believe, is on first.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, the Chair has asked me to provide an update with regard to homelessness in the borough. Currently, the number of people or households presenting as homeless as an average on a weekly total is 2.14 per week. There is a possibility that as we emerge from the pandemic, the number of people presenting as homeless will increase. Therefore, this average figure will act as our baseline in order to establish the number of applicants presenting and whether or not we're experiencing an increase or decrease in the demand for the service going forward. There are currently no rough sleepers in the borough. There are 19 single or couple households in temporary accommodation, of which 3 are in self-contained temporary accommodation managed by the housing team, and 16 are in B&B type accommodation, 2 of which are currently due to move on to secured accommodation. There is currently a high number of people being accommodated under the Everyone In initiative as a result of the pandemic. Approximately half of these are in B&B accommodation and are not actively engaging with our officers, and as such it is difficult to work with these people with a view to securing alternative accommodation. We anticipate a change in government policy in the coming months, and this may result in people becoming more engaged with our officers or the council ending its duty to accommodate. There are currently 8 family households in temporary accommodation, of which 2 are in the private sector leased accommodation and 6 are in council-owned stock. Over the last 3 months, our primary focus has been to reduce the number of families in temporary accommodation. Where appropriate and necessary, we take legal measures, and as a result, we have recently effectively ended our duty to accommodate 2 households. We are continuing to decommission the general needs stock properties we use as temporary accommodation, and our current position is 6 properties in this category. Moving on now to the exemption reporting for Q3 on page 16 of your report. Both of the development control targets are red, mainly as a result of the low number of applications and appeals determined as part of this indicator. For minor planning applications, all previous months in 2020-21 have met the target. And as explained at the last committee meeting, in terms of appeals, due to the low number involved, I consider this to be low risk in terms of MHCRG taking any intervention action. In terms of the redevelopment of Paddock Street car park, this project has been affected by the delay in receiving grant funding from the Leicestershire Business Rates Board. As reported to full council in December, this project will now be rescheduled to 2021-22. In terms of void times for our housing stock, at the end of this quarter, it stood at 27 days compared to the target of 20 days. Our housing manager is actively looking to reduce this, and in addition, we'll look to change the target next year so that it also takes account of the letting time as well. Moving back up now to the update report, starting on page 14, Appendix 1 provides an update on the 2020-21 Housing Capital Programme. Please accept my apologies for the subheading in the report, which incorrectly refers to the previous year. I won't detail each element of the capital programme, but needless to say, it continues to be affected by the ability to carry out work and to enter customers' homes during the pandemic. However, 44 new kitchens and 88 new bathrooms have been installed this year as part of our capital programme. In terms of gas servicing, in September, performance stood at 98%. In December, as reported in this report, it had slipped to 94%, and the current position is 95%. Performance has been affected by our contractors' ability to enter customers' homes as a result of the pandemic. Our recording of this situation is compliant with the guidelines. However, and in addition to this, the housing manager now has an action plan in place in order to ensure that outstanding gas servicing takes place. If a tenant misses 3 appointments with our contractor, then the case is passed to our housing maintenance team to follow up. If the tenant still fails to respond, then the case enters a legal remedy phase, with our housing officers also carrying out door knocks in an attempt to arrange a service with the tenant. We currently have 24 households in this position, although it's important to recognise that households move in and out of this phase on an ongoing basis. But for households that consistently remain in this phase, we will be looking to move to legal action by the end of this month if access still has not been gained. The position is reviewed on a weekly basis by the housing manager and his team. In terms of customer satisfaction, a comprehensive tenant questionnaire will shortly be issued, allowing the opportunity for tenants to comment upon further works that are being carried out by our contractors, other services provided by the housing department, and also the quality of the cleaning service. At the request of committee at the last meeting, the results of previous customer satisfaction surveying has been included within this report. This was carried out prior to the pandemic and by an independent consultancy rather than our own customer services staff, which was also at the request of committee. I'm now going to hand over, Chair, if it's okay, to Mrs. Fisher, who will be able to talk you through the results of the survey, after which I'll be happy to take any questions about the survey or any other aspects that I've mentioned in my report.
Okay, Mr. Bentley, if we wait a minute till Mrs. Fisher's done her bit. Okay, Mrs. Fisher then.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. If I can refer members to page 34 of Appendix 1, which talks about the Net Promoter Score, which is a metric we use for customer satisfaction. Within Oaby and Wigston Borough Council, we use two metrics, CSAT and NPS, and these are two well-renowned metrics for measuring customer satisfaction across businesses and industry. If I can give an explanation, and then we can move on to the scoring on page 33 of the appendix. The Net Promoter Score measures customer experience. As I've mentioned, it's a proven metric and now provides a core measurement for customer experience management programs around the world. The key thing to remember is the calculation of the Net Promoter Score. Questions are always asked on a 0 to 10 scoring ratio. 0 to 6 are what we would call detractors, so people who are deeply unhappy with our service that we are providing. Scoring 7 and 8 are people who are what we would call passive, and they are just fairly okay with the service that we are providing. And then the 9 to 10 we would call promoters, and they would be our advocates who go out and say that the service we're providing is exceptional. The other key thing to mention is the scoring metrics. When we calculate, you would take the number of detractors away from promoters, and that gives us what's called a Net Promoter Score. The range of that Net Promoter Score can be from a low of -100 to a high of +100. And so that's really important to bear in mind when I start talking about the Star Tracker dashboard on page 33. So if I can move to page 33 now, I will give an overview of the results of the Wave 1 report, which Mr. Thorpe referred to. However, if members will also accept my apologies, on the bottom right-hand side, where it says the Net Promoter Score, the box is actually where it says 51% should be green, and the box at the bottom where it says 29% should be red, which gives us a Net Promoter Score of 22. So if that can be borne in mind, bearing in mind I said you can score it from -100 to +100, we've got 22. If you're looking for a best in class for the Net Promoter Score, it's never more than about 55%. So just bear that in mind as well. Also on the right-hand side, you'll see work being completed, being given choice of product, and reported home improvement issues. They are what we would call our key overarching key drivers. And beneath that are the questions which were asked in the survey. So if we now move to the left-hand side, you will see the service areas which are green, and this is where you can consider positive results. So for example, I will pick some highlights out. Satisfaction with information received before start of the work, 60%. That is a good result. Satisfaction with the products that are made available, 52%. Again, that's a good result. Satisfaction with the choice of products given, again, 75% is a very high result. Satisfaction with the council dealing with reported issues, 67%, again, a high result. Ease of contacting the council if work-related information was needed, 64%. So there are some really positive, high responses on satisfaction areas within the survey. Then what the survey will do as part of the Net Promoter Score is pull out areas of improvement. So if we look, one of the key areas I would say we need to look at is dissatisfaction with being kept informed, well informed during the works, which is 40%. Dissatisfaction with the time taken to complete the work on the property, 47%. Another one, dissatisfaction with the overall service provided by the contractor, 36%. So one of the key actions that happens after these results are delivered to us is that we then move into an action phase and have the conversations with Matthews and Tannert. And I'll hand back now to Mr. Thorpe to talk about some of those actions that have already been taken regarding areas of improvement.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. And just very briefly, Chair, to say that really there were two main issues in the early days of the contract, which would have been picked up by the survey. Firstly, the contractors were giving customers completion times that did not allow for any flexibility. So for things like taking extra time with the work because of problems that were discovered during carrying out the work, or areas of work that led to something else needing to be carried out. And so this meant that the initial completion date was not met, but this has now been rectified, and customers are being given more appropriate completion dates. We also work with the contractor to ensure that they provided better customer service to our tenants. Although due to the pandemic, work has been a little bit sporadic since the survey was completed, I think it's fair to say that the number of complaints that have been received by the council about the contractors regarding these two matters has significantly decreased. So I think that we can say there's been some improvement since that survey was carried out. Chair, I'll now hand back over to you, and as I say, happy to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, Mr. Bentley, please hand up for a long while.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions. On page 15 regarding gas safety is a little bit concerning. It's good to hear that there's an action plan being put in place to get all this completed, but I believe Mr. Thorpe said there were 24 still outstanding that they can't get access to. How many of these 24 are consistently refusing access over the years? Do we have any details on that? And also, could I have an opinion regarding the legal standing of the council, if anything was wrong in the meantime? If there are any accidents regarding gas, what would the council's standing be? Would we be liable for any prosecutions regarding that? If those questions could be answered, then I've got some more after that.
Okay, Mr. Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start and then perhaps hand over to Mr. Gill to comment as well on the legal standing. In terms of the number of tenants that are consistently refusing access, that will be very few, if any, because we will deal with them if that consistency continues to occur. The situation that we've got at the moment with those 24 is that they've not responded to 3 requests by our contractors to undertake servicing, and they've not responded to 1 request by our own staff. And as I said, we're now on the stage where our housing officers are undertaking door knocking, and if by the end of the month that still has been unsuccessful, then we will look to take some legal action in order to gain access to those properties, or to shut down the gas supply to them. Specific guidance has been issued during the pandemic that we need to take into account, and we are taking that into account, and we are compliant with that guidance in terms of recording requests for appointments and appointments missed, and also recording what we're doing in order to try to gain access. As I say, I'll hand over to Mr. Gill now, and I think he'll be able to comment on the legal position a little bit more.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Thank you, Chair. The position as far as the legal situation is concerned is that there are a number of options. One is that you treat the failure to respond to the council as a breach of tenancy. If that's the case, you would then have to serve a notice of the appropriate sort. If it's a secure tenancy, it will be 28 days, and then you have to issue proceedings. Then you have to satisfy the court that it's reasonable in all of the circumstances for you to be granted possession of the property. What would normally happen in those cases is that the court would generally suspend the order on the basis that the tenant allows entry into the property. Another option is that you consider a warrant under the Environmental Protection Act that the building is prejudicial to health. The issue with that is that there is a different school of thought across the country as to whether it is appropriate. Some court areas will accept them, some court areas won't accept them. The other option is that you can consider a general injunction under Section 222 of the Local Government Act, the difficulty with that is that it doesn't give you a power of entry, which is what, in essence, that you're trying to seek. My preferred option is that where there is access to the gas supply externally, then if you've tried and you can't get into service the premises, you affix a notice to the door, giving them 48 hours notice, and then just cap the gas supply. And the consequence of that is that the tenant generally contacts you very quickly and allows you almost immediate access, so you can get into the premises to do your testing. In terms of the council's legal liability, provided that we have robust evidence that we have tried all of these means, then the council cannot be held at fault. The property is let to the tenant for their own use and enjoyment, and we have no powers which allow us just to go and force our way into the property unless due process has been complied with. And I hope that clarifies the position, Councillor Bentley.
It does. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Gill.
The
Moving on.
COVID regulations actually state council must take all reasonable steps. That's because it's always an argument point, doesn't it? What is reasonable and what is not. I will say that 2 of these households are shielding, and that's been proved they are shielding. So they're being given carbon monoxide meters to put in those 2 properties. So if anything did go wrong, the meter will go off. So those 2 are protected. But they're the 2. The rest are free rein to do whatever we need to do to get in.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Bentley.
Thank you. Right. Going on to page 16 and the box showing the red and amber. The 2 red boxes showing the appeals. We've got 3 applications determined with a 90-day average due to 1 going out of time. That doesn't read right to me. Have we got 3 applications that forced it into red because of 1 application going out of time? That doesn't quite read right to me. Also, we don't have any form of information about what these applications were and why they went to appeal and why the appeals were committed. We used to get this sort of information, and I think members should have this sort of information. It's very important to the council that we don't lose our planning powers. And I understand that these are a very small amount, so it's unlikely that the government would take action on us, but on the other hand, they could. So members need to know what applications they are, why they went to appeal, why the appeals were either dismissed or allowed, especially when they're allowed, because that's concerning, and why they're specifically going over. Is there a specific reason? Is there a resource reason? Is there a technical reason? Members need to know this. Also on the same page, it was mentioned about Paddock Street, and the reason it's in amber is because of, obviously, for COVID, but the main point is it's to have all the necessary approvals in place to commence the redevelopment of Paddock Street. And then it goes on to say that the grant funding from the business rates pool was delayed. But does that mean that all of the permissions need to be in place? Does that include planning permission? Are we going to have a planning application for this? Are we going to see the designs of this? It just doesn't give me much information on why it's there, why it's amber, and what's further needed to be done on that. So if we could have some clarity on that, please.
Mr. Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, in terms of the planning applications, 1 went over time, and 2 were as a result of a request of an extension of time. Requesting extensions of time for determining planning applications is often done if we feel that by requesting, for example, revised plans, we would be able to give a planning permission other than refusing it within the time available. So it is actually quite common practice to request an extension of time and for it to be granted, whereby we concede some changes to the application and therefore grant permission. So in some respects, it is reflective of better customer service to go over time, but still to be able to give a permission in the longer term. And that doesn't affect our statistics either. If we request and an extension of time is granted, then it seems being permitted within the time limit in terms of the national indicator. In terms of appeals, I am pretty certain that when we receive a response to an appeal, we put something in the members' bulletin about that. Certainly, I've seen a couple in the last year or so where we've done that, and we certainly try to do that. But I will make sure that we are consistently doing that as a matter of course, so that members can see the reason something went to appeal, what was considered by the planning inspector in determining the appeal, and also the outcome of it. And of course, the impact that it might have on the council in terms of determining further applications as well. In terms of Paddock Street, I believe the indicator was related to all approvals which would have included planning permission. But as I say, because we weren't able to commence the feasibility work, because we haven't received the funding in time this year, we've pushed that forward into the next financial year. I gave an update on Paddock Street for council in December, and said that we will be pushing that forward next year, and we will be providing members with regular updates as we do so.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yes, certainly.
Just quickly on the bit you said about the applications being determined with extensions. If officers are following due process and it's acceptable for us to ask for an extension and the permission is given for the extension, isn't that falsely putting the indicator into red? If the procedures are followed, and is the target not right? I just don't want to see things in red when officers are actually doing what they should do and following due process.
The target is the national target. It's what we have to report on nationally. So that is the target that's contained in the KPI. But as I mentioned, in terms of the national reporting, if an extension of time has been sought and agreed to, then that doesn't count against us in terms of the national statistics. So that is something that actually we could look at in terms of next year's KPI, so that we eliminate where an extension of time has been sought and agreed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right. Richard Morris.
Sorry, Chair, it's Councillor Boyce with his hands raised next.
Oh, okay. And Mr. Lloyd also has got his hand raised, I think.
And Mrs. Hack.
Okay, Mr. Boyce.
In which case, with apologies to Councillor Morris for apparently butting in, can I go back to the same point that Councillor Bentley mentioned? And this is about reporting, but I mean, determine minor applications within 56 days or within agreed time extensions. Then the commentary says 3 applications determined with a 90-day average due to one going out of time, and the other 2, of course, are in time because they're within an agreed extension. Putting it simply, what this raises the question is, how many applications did we have all told? And what is the 90-day average or the 56-day average of all of them? Putting it simply, all that we've managed to do is raise more questions than answers in the commentary. So rather than answer that now, can we next time have a commentary which explains the problem, not confuses the problem? That would be that one. Page 34, if we may. Just flick through my computer. This is the
Star Tracker dashboard report for wave 1.
Yes.
Discounting the fact that I was losing interest after the fourth word, it would be rather helpful to members if we could actually indicate an indicative, well, not target is probably the wrong word, an indicative positive score. Mrs. Fisher pointed out that somewhere around 55 is actually a good score. Then it needs to go on the dashboard so members can realise that what they're looking for is anything below that, and frankly, explaining the bit below is probably even a bit harder. So we do need to simplify it so that either a member of the council or a member of the public can actually understand it a little bit easier. Thank you.
Okay, can that be done?
Yes, Chair, it can.
Thank you. I mean, I took one look at it and thought, so I don't understand this. So I'm not alone. Thank you. Mr. Lloydell.
Thank you, Chair. Go back to page 16, if I may. 4.2. It's just a clarification, really. Revenues. I mean, it's talking about explaining that the collection of 30 million plus 12 million of non-domestic rates. It says, but please note, because of the pandemic, etc., and the last sentence says this has changed the correlation figure above for non-domestic rates of approximately 7 million. I just want to identify or clarify what that means against the 12 million, which means it's 5 million short. Is that to be taken away from that? Is that additional, or how does it work? Please.
I'm not sure whether that's Mr. Thorpe's area or it's Mr. Hines' area, actually. Mr. Thorpe?
Chair, that's actually going to be dealt with in the next section.
Okay, all right. So we'll come back to that. Mr. Morris?
Sorry, Chair, Councillor Morris hasn't raised his hand, but it's Councillor Hack.
Mrs. Hack then. Mrs. Hack.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of questions. Councillor Bentley has very comprehensively covered my planning and the guest safety questions. I just got one question regarding the homelessness. Mr. Thorpe, you mentioned everyone in initiative and temporary accommodation. Is that two separate things, or the figures that you mentioned, are they both together? You mentioned around 17 people or something. Am I correct to know?
Yeah, so the everyone in initiative is something that the government brought forward as a result of the COVID pandemic, and it required councils to house people who were homeless, who the councils wouldn't normally have a duty to provide a home to on a temporary basis, and that's what we did, and we're still providing accommodation for those people. So the effect that that's had is that it's increased the number of people we have in temporary accommodation, particularly single people, and that's why that number in terms of people in B&Bs has gone up. And it's also why I mentioned that we're actually struggling to engage with some of those people because they're not engaging with us in terms of being able to move them on to longer term secure accommodation. So as I mentioned, the government, I think, are going to provide some more guidance in the next few months, which we'll then be able to act upon in terms of how we move those people on.
Thank you, that's helpful, because I wasn't sure whether everyone in initiative and the temporary accommodation has two separate figures. So that's helpful, thank you.
Unfortunately, there's only one hostel operation at the moment. It's at Loughborough, a 30-bed unit. I'm not sure whether it's still open because of COVID. That's the only accommodation in the whole of the county. I've been pressing at county to have another one in the south of the county to assist us when, inevitably, when the landlords start going to the courts for evictions. I'm afraid we're going to have an avalanche of people coming to us for accommodation, in which we're struggling to meet that need. Difficult times. Anybody else coming along that wants to ask a question?
Councillor Allam, Chair.
Councillor Allen, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just got a few questions. Going on page 16 and sticking around the theme of built-in environments, I'd like to know, in terms of the appeals, you said you've got an appeal success rate of 70%, and there's 3 appeals that have been determined this year. In total, how many appeals do you think we've got that are coming, sort of appeals on their applications that are coming through, roughly in total? That's one question I've got. The other one is with regards to your extension time. I'd like to know how many enforcements have been, been put out there as well. So that's 2 questions there I've got with regards to the built environment. Just going down further on the page, on page 16, where you got revenues.
That's coming later, Mr. Allen.
Is that coming later? Okay, then that's fine. Let's deal with those 2 questions then. If you could just shed a bit of light on that. How many appeals and how many enforcements have we had?
Chair, I can answer the question I can't answer the question in relation to appeals, because the KPI is actually only focusing on appeals that have been determined. So that's the information that I have to hand this evening. I can find out how many appeals we currently have in the pipeline and provide that after the meeting. In terms of the question about enforcement, Councillor Allam, are you asking how many enforcement cases we currently have open at the moment?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, I don't have that information to hand this evening, but I can provide that after the meeting.
Okay, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions at all?
Councillor Boyce, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Boyce.
That's fine. You can apologise to me all evening if you wish. Are we doing light bulb now or later?
That's later.
Well, because technically it's 3 point whatever it is, and it's in the appendix to that, which means it's now. But I'm happy to leave it till later.
I thought we'd do it later at the end of the meeting. Last item.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else?
No hands raised, Chair.
Right. Now item number 4 on page 16. Then finance update. Is that Mr. Hines? We've got a yes.
Could you unmute Mr. Hines?
Thank you. I shall go again. Apologies for Mr. Campbell not being invited to the meeting. I'll be able to give you a very high level overview of what's in his report. Just to answer Councillor Lloyd's question at the start, basically the government have given us the money that's the difference. So instead of having to collect 12 million, they've given us £5 million buffer. So we only have to collect 7. So we're not out of pocket because of that. That government are actually covering a gap in finances. What you will see from the figures we're getting is, as we've been talking about all year, the clear impact of COVID's had on our income collection, particularly around local businesses. You can see the collection rate has gone, it's 72.79% for the year against our target of 82.29. And if you take a walk around the high streets of the borough, you'll notice the amount of small independent shops that are no longer open, which is a real problem, not only for the council and its income collection, more of an issue for the county council because they take a bigger proportion of it, but also for the fact that you got people out of work related to this. So this then puts an additional additional pressure on things such as social care and benefits. One thing that is really pleasing though, and it kind of contradicts it, is our collection rate for council tax is just over 1.5% lower than we anticipated for a normal year. So it does go to show that our high direct debit levels are really contributing to enabling us to have some sort of consistency, and only having such a small impact on COVID related to council tax is really positive. So it does go to show that maybe the impact of businesses closing is affecting outside of the borough rather than inside of the borough, but that's something that we won't be able to quantify just yet. With respect to the KPIs, you'll see that, again, the two reds are about the collection rates. So as I've discussed earlier, the code has a massive impact on that, particularly on the business rates, and we can't collect from businesses who are no longer in operation, and we can't forecast that throughout the year. As for the other ambers, they're all slight delays, primarily the amount of information that comes through for new universal credit claims is patchy, but we record from the start of the claim, not from the time we get the right information in. Unlike some authorities who apparently turn around universal credit claims in 5 days. That's once they've got all the right information in, not from when the first time somebody's applied. So what's not included on there is the immense amount of money and the 8 or 9 different grant schemes that these teams have been dealing with, plus the fact they've been giving council tax support out, and the shielding work, and the COVID lockdown grants to individuals. The position is really good. Obviously, it could be better, but the issue is moving forward. I think this is a real big signifier about how do we get businesses back into the borough, A, to make sure the economy is going, but B, to make sure our income's where it should be. The government is still talking about giving us some money next year to help cover that, but that's not going to cover the long-term absences in the shops. Happy to take any questions where I can, but if not, I'll pass the questions on to, well, Mr. Ball can take note, pass the questions on to Mr. Campbell, who will respond accordingly.
I've got Mr. Allen asking a question. His hand's up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question, Mr. Hines, is just really on page 17. You know, where you talk about the soft reminders. I'd just like to know what exactly is a soft reminder, and is it policy, and is it something that is a more of a strategic decision or an operational decision? That's my first question there. If you could answer.
I go back to that. That question was, I think, asked by Councillor Bentley back in September. It is national policy and council policy to issue reminders through a staged process. First of all, it's a soft reminder. So, Councillor Alam, if you don't pay your council tax bill, you will get a soft reminder reminding you to pay your council tax bill. You will then go through various stages to the point where we take you to court or send the bailiffs around. Obviously, that is a place we don't want to get to. So, a lot of encouragement is taking place. Hence, we didn't do, as per government guidance back in the summer, any recovery work, because they said don't, people are out of work, don't put stress on. And you'll see that the soft recovery and the sort of the more what's the word I'm looking for? More formal letters saying if you do not pay up, you will be getting a court order, do tend to work. It's not often that we do have to take many people to court. As you see with the collection rate, it works. The heavy-handed approach isn't particularly good, particularly now, particularly the stresses people are under, but they tend to see this as a, you've reminded me once, I've not paid it, you've reminded me again, oh dear, you're going to take me to court if I don't pay up. They pay up, which is really useful.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And just the second question I've got, which is back on page 16. It says, due to the pandemic, the government decided to award 100% discount to all businesses that come under hospitality, retail, and the leisure sector. Yeah. Now, not all of the businesses on the high street do fall within that. And we've got other businesses such as, you know, the business park behind the parade. I'm just wondering, have they been contacted in terms of collecting revenue? I mean, are they basically paying up, similar to what's going on here?
Yeah, if you're asking about specific businesses, A, I couldn't tell you, and B, I would not be able to tell you due to the confidentiality of that information. But what I can say is that businesses who aren't paying up are being chased and are going through the formal processes where needed. But as it stands, the majority of the people who aren't paying are the smaller businesses who have gone bust. What would have been helpful would be if the government, when it issued the grants, allowed some of that money to be almost paid to the person to be paid back to pay their bills, but they haven't allowed to do that. So basically, if you're a business and you get a grant from us to help pay your bills, you can spend it on whatever you like. So that's where some of the issues are, and that's a national issue. But as it stands, we're going through all the recovery we can do to get the businesses either on payment plans where they're not paying to make sure they're back on the feet, because what we don't want to do is claw all the money back from a business who could send them under, whereas if they've got an agreement and a payment plan with us, can carry on trading and we get all the money and the business stays in operation. One of the things that we have to be aware of is the new government policy that's coming on May the 4th, which was done without consultation with any local authorities, respective of how we get the money in or the impact on local businesses. And that is the breathing space legislation, where we're not allowed to take any action over a period of time for those who haven't paid their bills. It's 60 odd days. That for us at the minute is forecast we can manage it. Other authorities are going, that's a massive income loss just on cash flow basis. So that's something we've got to be aware of, because if you are a maybe less ethical business, you might be able to use that to maximise your cash flows by not paying the council for 60 days. So that's something we've got to be aware of, that whilst we can forecast the amount of businesses who might not pay up in 60 days because they can't afford it, there may be some businesses who decide that they won't pay up for 60 days because they're better off getting a short-term investment to cover that money and then pay us up when it's the last day.
Can I just come back on that?
Yeah, certainly.
Sorry. Is it okay to come back, Chair?
Yes, come back, yes.
Okay. So, you know, these businesses that have gone under, and yeah, you're right, Mr. Hines, you can see it on the parade, you can see the businesses involved. And then we've got this issue that we've got this deficit of business rates that we're sort of saying that are not there and haven't clawed back. Is there a time period between when they've gone under and that outstanding payment that we are looking for? Is it something that we're clawing back, or is it something that we can't ever get hold of? I'm just trying to wonder out the difference between a business going under and the business outstanding business rate between those two points.
Sorry, Mr. Gill can give you the legislation on the timings.
Thank you. The position is that once the debt has been proved on a business, you have 6 years in which you can recover the debt unless the business no longer exists. So if it's a limited company and it goes into receivership or administration, you then become an unsecured creditor. If it is an individual who doesn't become bankrupt, then technically you can chase them for 6 years.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other questions at all? I can't see any hands up.
Councillor Lloydell, Chair.
Councillor Lloydell, yes, okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It's only a very quick one on page 17, 4.3, the collection rates, the council tax collection rates. Normally, under normal circumstances, it's paid over a 10-month period. Legislation allows it to go over 12 months. Have we got anybody that's applied to do that, or are we offering that to help ease the burden on the taxpayer? So, thank you.
If I may, Chair, we offered that from day one of COVID coming in. We offered people to be able to pay over 10 months, over 12 months, or defer their payments for 2 months and pay over 10 months. So we give people lots of options. And I think that's really helped with our collection rate.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very well done for that. Thank you.
Councillor Hack, Chair.
Mrs. Hack.
Thank you, Chair. I will ask a question, but I think it might not be relevant. I was just going to ask, do we know what percentage of these are sole traders and companies? Because obviously we can't recover from companies. So
no, I'm afraid not.
No, okay, I don't think so.
Sorry.
That's fine. Thanks.
No other questions? Can't see anybody.
No further hands, Chair.
All right.
Thank you, Chair.
Item number, thank you, Mr. Hines. Item number 5, Community and Wellbeing Service. Mrs. Lennox.
Thank you, Chair. I've been asked to cover the Community Recovery Grant at 5.5 on page 20. So the Voluntary and Community Sector COVID-19 Recovery Grant Scheme has been in operation since the end of October last year. Grants to voluntary groups active within the borough were available with a maximum of £300 per organisation. So you'll see the list of 4 organisations that have been funded in Q3. The only one to add to that, which came in early in Q4 is the Wigston Club for Young People, who have been awarded £300. And the question asked of me is how much has been spent, how much was available, and what's the total left? So the total amount spent is £1,239.95p. The total available was £4,000 in the pot, and that leaves £2,760.05p. Moving on to exception reporting on page 23, the Citizens Panel sign up. The Community and Wellbeing Department hasn't signed up as many residents to the Citizens Panel as they would have liked, hence this KPI is showing amber. However, on a positive note, those on the database have been involved in a range of consultation opportunities in order to input into how council services are delivered. For example, some of the consultations included the budget consultation 2020 to 21, selective licensing consultation, the review of statement of licensing, the annual community safety survey, investing in a growing economy survey, and the electric vehicle charging points consultation. The Citizens Panel opportunity has added to the other methods used by the council to consult with residents, giving those who might be affected by change of policy or service design the opportunity to feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. One or two bits to come up. First of all, I'd like to make a comment about the council's park ranger. He's just recently joined us. I've been complaining about Broxhill and other areas for some time. And I was pleased to go up just under a week ago. There's been quite a lot of improvements there since she joined us. So can we thank her for the work she's done up there? I think she's done most of it herself, actually. It is a big improvement.
Yes, she has indeed. Thank you very much, and I'll feed that back.
Thank you. Right. Questions?
Councillor Boyce, Chair.
Mr. Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. 5.12, the exception report. We've actually had this exception report previously, virtually every year since we started this. It raises the question, is this an achievable target? Is it an achievable concept, a citizens panel? And indeed, is this the best use of certain members of staff's time? So can I ask that the whole issue of the citizens panel be taken back and considered within the corporate plan, rather than worry too much about its performance now? Let's work out where it should be in the future and either redirect it or direct it in such a way that's achievable. Thank you.
Okay.
No problem.
Councillor
Anybody
Bentley,
else?
Chair.
Sorry?
Councillor Bentley, Chair.
Mr. Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick question, bit of clarification. Page 21, 5.9 antisocial behaviour, second paragraph, first line, says that the council will continue to offer the acceptable behaviour contract incentive scheme. Could I just ask, what's the incentive?
Yeah, so those individuals that have signed up to an ABC, as they call it, will be given an incentive to stay on that straight and narrow path. And they range from different things. It could be education in order to increase their skills. There are a variety of opportunities depending on the interest of the young person, but it's certainly to encourage them. For instance, I believe one some time ago was in respect to putting the individual through a coaching, very, very low level coaching award for football.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
And on this section, I did ask for two things to come forward. One about the garden waste collection, how is that going this year? I don't know who can answer that one. I think Mrs. Fisher might have the details for that. The other one is about allotments, vacancy and action plan to fill them. I think Mr. Gill's going to cover that. And also the amount of cemetery availability that is left in the borough for OB and for Wixton cemeteries. And one for Mr. Thorpe is the Wixton Post Office. Is there any further update on that? So in this section, there's just 4 questions that need answering. I think Mrs. Fisher is the first one to come.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as far as garden waste, from January to March, 1st of March 2020, there was 4,235, I believe, sign-ups, and in January to the 1st of March 2021, this has dropped by about 1,000. I believe it's 3,330 approximately.
Okay. And have we sorted out the payment by cheque as well as by online? Because a lot of our elderly residents don't do online, so they're reluctant to, they can't join the service.
Chair, they can. As I believe Mr. Gill mentioned in another meeting previously, we don't want to disenfranchise people, and residents can actually pay by cheque, yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Gill will answer about allotment vacancy within cemetery availability.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to allotments, we have a total of 358 plots across various sites. We have 18 that are vacant, which means an occupancy rate of 95%. There's an 18-month waiting list because people don't want the vacant allotments because they're in the wrong location or they're too large, and they would prefer to wait till something more suitable comes up. And on that basis, at this present moment in time, there is no intention of creating an action plan to try and fill them. It's normally the case that as the weather picks up, we will get further interest. So we're hoping that as a natural process, later in the year, the vacancy rate will drop even further. With regard to the funerals and the cemeteries, in respect of Wixton Cemetery, we have a 10-year capacity at the current rate, and at OB we have 5 years capacity at the current rate.
Thank you very much. We should need to keep an eye on those things, as you know, the years do pass by. We need to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, as you appreciate, Chair, we do have contingencies that have been considered, and there is land allocated in the local plan should the need arise. So the corporate assets manager will be keeping a BDI on it and bringing forward proposals as and when required.
Do we still do allotment inspections twice a year?
We do try and endeavour. As you appreciate, with COVID, it has been difficult. We are trying to encourage more traction with the sites so that we have more allotment associations that can self-police, in inverted commas, so that if there are issues with sites, that they can let us know and we can deal. I mean, ideally, personal experience would be that you know, a site is well managed when it's taken over by an allotment society. Okay, and Mr. Thorpe for the Post Office.
Thank you, Chair. The current position with Wixton Post Office is that it's expected to reopen after the lockdown, and that the Post Office aren't looking for a new operator. So that would indicate, although we don't know, that the unit in which it is located will also reopen.
Can we please keep an eye on that? It's important for people of Wixton we have a post office. Thank you. Even more so because the South Wixton one I think is still closed. Any other questions at all before we move on?
Councillor Hack, Chair.
Mrs. Hack, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly regarding the payment for the green waste. If I remember it correctly, we used to have some pay points. Was that for the council tax? Could that be set up for green waste? And also, when we send the reminders to people, could we send a pay slip with that? So should they wish to go to a bank or fill in the direct debit details, they could do that? Is that possible?
Councillor Hack, I need to investigate that. I don't have that information to hand, I'm afraid, but I'm willing to come back to the committee and give that update.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions at all?
To Chair, Councillor Charlesworth first.
Mr. Charlesworth.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, on all the issues you've just raised, actually, the post office, yes, it needs to come back. The one on Little Hill, which is now taking the brunt of all the post office work, the queues out there are significant every day. I think it works a fairly short day, which makes it difficult. But the word I'd heard is that peacocks were not coming back. If that's not the case, great, because we need that post office back. Garden waste, 1,000 down suggests, that's what, 20%, 25% down? Why is that? It can't be the rise we've done. Well, that can't explain all of it, I wouldn't have thought. Are people waiting until they actually need the service now before they sign up again? Because we're now doing a year-to-year payment scheme. If people delay it until they actually need it, like June, July, they get 3/4 of a year instead of having to pay for the whole year. I'd probably do that, to be honest. I don't know whether that's the case. Allotments, well, it's on my register of interest. I have an allotment at Ayleston Lane. There is a lot of trying to do the self-management there, but they will never do total self-management there because it would be too complicated and too much trouble, basically, for the allotment association. I can't speak for the other allotments, but the take-up at Ayleston Lane is very poor, and the allotments that aren't being used are vacant, have been vacant a very long time, and have now reached a stage where even the most hardened gardener would not even dream of tackling it. The briar and the couch grass and the mare's tail, I wouldn't take it on for all the tea in China. So why anybody who wants to take on an allotment would go to Ayleston Lane at the moment, I don't know. Whether we can do anything with those allotments, clear them, turn them over, I don't know. I know there's an expense at that. But I have noticed, I've had a couple of comments about people trying to pay online, and there's been 1 or 2 issues. Last weekend, apparently, there was an issue with online payments and people were trying to make payments and couldn't. So if anybody can answer that, but that's my observations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mrs. Fisher, any comment?
With regard to garden waste, when we started off the process of moving garden waste from a rolling 12 months to an annual renewal, that may be one of the reasons. I think what we can do, and without a deeper analysis, is actually we can write to those who haven't rejoined, and we can ask them why they haven't rejoined and the rationale and the reasons behind that. And then that will give some information to members that they can analyse and decide whether it was price, whether it was the proratering or the moving to an annual renewal from a rolling 12 months.
Okay, can we do that?
Yes, we can do that, certainly.
Thank you. Right, who's next?
Councillor Lloydall, Chair.
Mr. Lloydall.
Well, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things, if I may. Firstly, page 21, antisocial behaviour. It's important to remember that we do have an issue of antisocial behaviour, not to the extent that we need to worry too much about it. To clarify what Mrs. Lennox has said, and what the question about young people being helped. We started work with the South Leicestershire pupil referral unit in Wixton, which is behind the swimming pool. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we couldn't carry on with that until such times that they get back to school, which is going to be soon. So we'll re-engage with them. But one of the important things is, remember, is some of the young people, because of their behaviour, it's not necessarily because of them, it's because of their background. And having worked with, and this is some time ago, it's not recently, but it's important to remember that instead of penalising or criminalising that young person, we work with him and find out what his interests were. I mean, when a young person gets locked out of the house, then you can understand that why the young person might get into trouble. But his interest was fishing, big time. So we introduced him to the local fishing shop, and they took him on and gave him a part-time job, and also took him fishing. And the change in that young person was, he was supported by the various agencies, but the change in that young person was amazing, simply because somebody cared and somebody took him on board. So they're the sort of things, just to clarify what can happen, and the outcome can be quite positive. From an antisocial behaviour point of view, let me give you the figures for Wixton, for example. And these are up till January this year. And there's 14 issues of antisocial behaviour, and they're mainly in the central Wixton. So it's not that bad. Towards the end, the boundary between the city and Wixton Fields has been none. And then from Kilby Bridge, South Wixton, there's equally none. So we're tackling it, and it's being dealt with quite significantly. The overall crimes within Wixton up until January was 124. And one of the things we should be concerned about is violence and sexual offences, 51, which is something needs to be tackled, and that will be brought up at the next Community Safety Partnership. And that can be emulated through South Wixton and Wixton. I've got the figures from all up until the January. So antisocial behaviour is not that bad. It's being tackled. From a garden waste point of view, Philippa, I'd like to congratulate your staff in dealing with the letters that went out. Said get online and do this, do that. But of course, there are people that are not online. They haven't got that facility. So there was 2 cases last week and 1 case yesterday, both successful. We signposted them to the desk, help desk, and they dealt with them efficiently and straight away. I'll just put my 10% in for the £150 I've just raised for you. But Philip, I thank your staff there, because they did deal with it straight away. But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Loyland.
Thank you. Anybody else make any comment?
Councillor Boyce, Chair.
Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, the post office in South Wixton was open today.
Today, was it? Yeah, thank you.
No further hands raised, Chair.
No, okay, thank you. We move on now to item number 7, Law and Democracy. Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to keep this very brief. You'll see that the new cemetery policy, rules and regulations was implemented in April, and that's been well received by staff, funeral directors and the cemetery users. And the document is available on the council's website. The redesign of the play area inspection programme is complete, and we've got a new process and new forms now in use. The revenues repair budget, I'm aware that comments have been made as to why it was amalgamated. And the position is that it was based in 3 cost centres. 2 of those cost centres were connected to the depot, and then the other cost centre was connected to the corporate assets. So corporate assets had to ask the depot, Rox Hill, to place orders and make payments for them. So it was felt that it would be more efficient if they were all brought together under one head with one manager who could manage the process more easily. We're looking at the development of the strategy for parks and play areas and open spaces. and we're hoping to have a first draft amongst officers by the end of February, and then bring something back to members by the end of March. That may be slightly delayed because the officer concerned is currently working on the council's parking strategy with a view to bringing that to council on the 30th of March. Remains the case that the environment, health and licensing teams are still severely impacted, being called away from their routine work to deal with COVID-related issues. We have increased the number of HMOs or houses in multiple occupation in the borough, and we are now accelerating the implementation of the selective licensing scheme in South Wigston. We had in the region of 120 full licenses issued up to date. That compared to 70 a few weeks ago when I spoke at PFD. The licensing team are working hard to meet their targets on licensing applications in accordance with the timescales. We're dealing with a backlog of applications for taxis and taxi licenses, but unfortunately, the interim member of staff that we have, who is covering for the licensing enforcement officer, who is working as a COVID coordinator, will be leaving us at the end of March. So we anticipate at this stage that there may be some slight delay on that. In terms of the work of the COVID marshals, the COVID team, you'll be aware that we are on the roadmap to reopening the economy, which hopefully will be by middle of June. We have identified issues in the borough. Members have raised a number of issues around supermarkets, lack of social distancing, etc. We have therefore commissioned the COVID marshals to work again. They're working, they commence on Saturday the 6th. We have 2 working between the hours of 10 and 6 days a week. From this week, the 13th, we will be increasing that number to 6 marshals. And those marshals will be in Wigston, South Wigston and Oadby. Their focus will be on engaging with premises, ensuring that they are COVID safe. They will be actually visiting supermarkets and patrolling inside the supermarkets to support the supermarket's own staff. In terms of food safety, again, we've had considerable difficulty with it because of the lockdown and the guidance issued by the FSA. We're anticipating some new guidance very shortly. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make contact with the most at-risk premises. We're also making contact with all of those that register as a food business. It seems that most people, or a lot of people, have taken to home baking or home cooking, and there's somewhere in the region of 200 or 300 home bakers in the borough that all require a visit. The difficulty with that is, of course, that physical inspections are not permitted at the moment. So we're resorting to other methods. We are ringing them, we're asking them for risk assessments, we're asking them to provide their paperwork, we're asking them to provide evidence of the state of their premises through things like FaceTime and WhatsApp and other methods, so that we can actually see. It's not entirely satisfactory, but you'd get an impression pretty quickly if there was an issue with the kitchen, which required something to be dealt with. So that's our attempt to resolve that problem. And we're also in the process of developing a recovery food safety plan, which will be brought to members at some point, where we will identify the way that we're going to deal with the matters going forward. Electoral and democratic services. There is an issue around the remote meetings that we're currently holding. The legislation expires on the 6th of May. Governments say it expires. Governments say there's no time in the legislative timetable to pass the primary legislation that is required. However, there is a different view that is coming from the Association of Democratic Services Officers and Lawyers in Local Government. It's the view that you can hold remote meetings even on the basis of the 1972 Act. The LLG has issued a letter before action to the Minister, and he is required to make a response by the end of this week. If he fails to do so, proceedings will be issued seeking a declaration from the High Court that remote meetings are permissible. It seems there's a clear contradiction in government advice that you shouldn't be meeting, and yet in terms of local government and these meetings, it's saying that you should. So we need to clarify that. The model code of conduct was issued in December by the local government association. It was quickly withdrawn and then reissued a few days later, having been updated. The monitoring officers across the county are currently reviewing the draft model with a view to adopting a consistent approach so that members who are dual-hatted or triple-hatted members have a clear understanding of what's required of them at each authority. There may be some slight tweaks to it for local reasons. There is some guidance due to be published at the end of April. Once the guidance is published at the end of April, then the code and the guidance will be shared with members to take a view, a sounding as to whether or not you wish to consider taking it forward for full adoption. And members will be aware from the meetings that have been discussed that we're constantly looking at the committee structure and how we can strengthen the council's scrutiny function. The only red on my area, members, is the one in respect of migration towards paperless committees. There was a discussion as to whether or not that KPI should be removed, because it's quite clear that there's nothing further that we can do with it. However, it was decided that for the interest of consistency for this year, it would remain on the KPIs and it will be removed under the next corporate plan. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just ask one thing for members? Start on the. I'm a bit concerned about some of the Broxhill equipment. A lot of it's wood, and I think some of it's reaching the end of its life, already reached the end of its life. Can we have somebody inspect that sooner rather than later, please, Mr. Gill? I don't want any claims coming to us for anyone to get injured, but I noticed that some of the wooden steps, for want of a better word, have got gaps in them, which Mr. Lloyd will point out to me.
Now that we have the new Ranger imposed up at Broxhill, while she's based at the depot, technically, Margaret Kine, the corporate assets manager, has taken her under her wing and been up to Broxhill with her, and I've no doubt that those things will have already been reported, but the issue is trying to get the works done given the current COVID pandemic. But I will speak with the manager tomorrow to make sure that they're on the list to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Right, anybody else coming along here?
Councillor Lloydell, Chair.
Mr. Lloydell.
Thank you. You've alluded to it anyway, Chair, about Broxhill. Lovely centre, great. It's been well turned out with people trying to get fresh air and so on, and kids playing up on there. But there is an issue with regards to maintenance. There is an ankle breaker for little kids up on top of the hill there. It is broken and the bit's missing. Little kiddies can break ankles down there, and there is a claim that will come through if it's not done straight away. I'm looking at page 25, 7.1. Again, I can understand why the design of the play area inspection, you need a proper inspection regime. If you want the British standards and the standards of what you should be doing, I've got them all here. And now in use, and the amalgamation of the budget, that's down to you, that makes sense, but I can't see where it sits in the corporate assets when it's fits in with the parks, fits in with what they do down in the depot, fits in all there. What worries me is that they're going to carry on with the inspections. Have they got a set program when to do the inspections? Are they able to have they got the authority to then to do the repairs without having to go through? I've got to do some repairs. I've got to go back and get permission and this, that, and the other. Which, for me, the empowerment should be at the lowest level possible, and the freedom to be able to do the maintenance with the budget within reason should be done straight away without having to go back up and somebody saying, well, hold on, I'll have to talk to somebody else, I'll have to do this, I'll have to do that. It just needs to be, clarify that it can be done quite swiftly without those barriers. But I understand why you're doing it. I think it's good. Thank you.
If I can come back on that, Chair, yes. If I can clarify the position, what we've done is redesign the play area inspection programme. So there is a programme whereby the play areas are inspected on a regular basis. There are new inspection forms that are in use, and they provide continuity and certainty for when the reports come back. Minor repairs, very minor repairs, can be dealt with very quickly, but there is an issue in that if we have somebody who starts trying to do a minor repair and, to put it bluntly, makes a hash of it, the consequence of that is that the risk that a claim to us is going to be far greater than if we'd have waited a few days to make sure that the appropriate person with the appropriate skill set was dispatched to deal with the job. A lot of the play area inspections are now being conducted by the grounds maintenance crews. They're out there every day, they're visiting the parks, they're visiting the play areas, and they report that information back to the corporate assets manager, who makes sure that the work is being undertaken. You'll be aware from the corporate, the capital budget that went through previously, we're looking at remote working for environmental health and licensing team. And one of the things, if that is successful, is that we have these inspection programs that are done by staff that are fully IT equipped. So there is no delay in doing a paper form and then sending it to the office via the depot and everything else. It will automatically be uploaded and sent through to the appropriate person. So that's the sort of thing that we're looking to achieve, to ensure that we have a consistent approach, that we spend the money that we've got, which is a limited budget. We need to spend it wisely, and also we need to make sure, quite rightly, as Councillor Lloyd says, that our grounds are safe so that we reduce the risk of any litigation.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Any other questions at all?
No, Chair, although it may have been inadvertently done. I think we didn't come to Mrs. Fisher in terms of section 6 for customer service and transformation update, unless that was an intentional decision on your part, Chair.
No, I thought we'd covered that, but carry on, Mrs. Fisher. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. As we are aware, the customer service centre remains closed in Bell Street. I just want to touch on call volumes. In the last quarter, we did a comparison and saw that the call volumes had gone down considerably, full inquiries and telephone quick inquiries. As you can see, in October and November for full inquiries, these are the more detailed conversations that customer service centre technical staff have gone up slightly in October and November, but then start to fall again in December. For telephone quick inquiries, this follows the trend from the last quarter, where there is a considerable drop in calls, and it is our belief that this is due to channel shift, and they are finding that residents are finding different ways to find the information, hence the fact that full inquiries are slightly larger. One thing that I think we are very pleased to announce is the council in December 2020 were assessed for the Customer Service Excellence Achievement Award, and based on 59 criteria the council were measured on. There are 4 criterions: compliant plus, compliant, partial compliance and non-compliance. And we received 4 compliant pluses, which according to our assessor is very rare, and one partial compliance, which again is very rare. So I think it is testament to the hard work of all the staff who were involved in that assessment process and the work that was put in place, so that we achieved that award in December 2020. As part of our drive for continuous improvement, particularly around customer satisfaction, we have looked at our complaints process and have enhanced that, where we are using our customer service centre technical staff to triage calls. This enables us to do a first-time resolution with callers, and that reduces frustration and potential delay on what would have previously been put through as a complaint. We've also introduced 2 modules for staff complaints training, which very much enables staff to have a greater awareness of the complaints process. One is for all staff to do and complete, and then there is one specifically for managers, which gives a greater depth and understanding and training on the complaints process. Another initiative that we have implemented is customer satisfaction surveys. We've introduced 2 new types. The first is based on our customer service centre technical officers asking 6 specific questions to service callers on the service that they received when they called the customer service centre. And then the second type is measuring the other service areas across the council. And as you will see, this process started in November through the tables on the page that is now on the screen. In November, 67 surveys were completed for the customer satisfaction survey with a 98% result. In December, 59 were completed with a 96% result. For the service area satisfactions, in November, 22 were completed. We did this on the CSAT, if you remember the metric, not the Net Promoter Score. So 19 of those 22 in November were very satisfied and 3 were satisfied. And in December, we completed 7 with 7 very satisfied. And that information is shared with all the relevant service areas to ensure that there is continuous improvement. One of another initiative that we have implemented is service level agreements across the whole of the council where service is provided, and these are available on the website for transparency, and they are the specific functions are measured with targets and have metrics. These are reviewed on a monthly basis, and again these are published on our website for transparency with residents and businesses. And finally, there was some delay with our paying online system moving from a Paris platform to Civica. I'm pleased to report that this was implemented in November, and there was no diminishment to service and the general public, and there was a smooth transition from that the old platform to the new platform. Chair, that's my report for the customer service and transformation update. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Any questions at all? I can't see anybody's hands up.
No hands raised, Chair.
No, okay then. Right, thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Do you want to go through the Appendix 1 now? Or do you, the capital programme for the housing, or are you happy with that before you? Nobody's asking to go on that. Okay, so move straight to Appendix 3 now, light bulb. Who's going to do the light bulb? Is it going to be Mr. Thorpe, or is it Mrs. Fisher?
Chair, from my point of view, I was intending that light bulb was covered under my presentation earlier. I didn't mention it specifically, but if members have any questions, then I'm happy to do my best to answer them.
I think Mr. Boyce wished to ask a question on light bulb, didn't you, Mr. Boyce?
I'll certainly ask a question on the report. It does appear, if we can go to page, I don't know what page it is, it's
35.
Hang on, no, 38.
38.
Well, that's it. If you look at the top left-hand corner, completion times, years to date, number of weeks, we appear to be, now I will admit my eyes are not brilliant, but I think we're the worst in terms of time completion. Is that seems to be correct? And I'm completely confused as to how many cases are outstanding. I will say that, putting it simply, this report is a little confusing. Now, it may well be because I'm not trained, or it may well be I'm not switched on enough. It may be lots of things, but I'm certainly confused. So, first question, putting it simply, why are we treated worse than the rest of the districts?
Mr. Thorpe.
I don't think that we are treated worse than the rest of the districts. I think different districts are in different positions with their figures at different times, and that's what I'm trying to demonstrate to you, I suppose, by bringing this report to you, to every committee, and we will bring these statistics and reports to all committee meetings, as we have done over the last few committees over this financial year. If there's any specific questions, then I can go back to Lightbulb to seek specific answers, and I can ask them for a report on specifically Oby and Wigston and where they are with our cases. But the information that's before you is information that's presented to the whole of the partnership, and these are the dashboards that it's been agreed that they will present to the partnership meetings, and as I say, we're bringing this to your committee so that you can actually see what's happening.
Sorry if I may come back, Chair. In its very simplest sense, on Lightbulb there is a demand, there is a delivery, there's the time it takes to do the delivery, which that appears to show that we're rather slow, and there's a financial impact. Now, my understanding is that the statutory responsibility for DFG still remains with this council, in which case there's an amount of money which we had to do DFGs and an amount of money at the end of the year left. And I can't find any of those things apart from the time on these charts.
Mr. Thorpe?
It is correct that we have the statutory responsibility, which is delegated to Lightbulb through the delegated arrangement. Again, in terms of the financial position, I can seek some more information on that for you. But the money that is allocated to the borough is only spent in the borough. It's not spent in any other districts. And in addition to that, don't forget that Lightbulb is about a whole lot more than just the DFGs. And there's a number of other projects that Lightbulb are bringing forward that is funded by some of the money that comes to us. And one of those, as an example, is a project that's been brought forward in relation to hoarding, and to provide support to people that are hoarding and to minimise the number of people that are hoarding across the borough and indeed all of the partnership authority.
So putting it simply, how many hoarders do we have, and what's the success rate? The problem with all of this report is there's so much information but so little clarity. The simple fact is, as I said at the beginning, you have a demand, you have a performance, you have a time, and you have a cost. And of those four things seem to me to be the most basic, and they're not covered. Yes, fine. There's a hoarder process in the borough, but what's its outcome? What's the problem? What is the outcome against that problem? You know, if we're going to do these things, you should have the statistics to make sense to go with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce. Also, I understand government's allocated more money for DFGs this year, gone to county, and that should be passported through to the districts. Be nice to know what the extra money is and what it's being spent on. And as Mr. Boyce says, we don't know what budget is at the moment and how much money is left in the financial year. These things are crucial that we should know, and at the moment we don't. So can somebody give a report on that somewhere? Thank you. Mr. Thorpe, have we got agreement?
Yes, Chair. I was actually thinking what I might do for a future meeting is invite one of the Lightbulb representatives along to the meeting to give a presentation. I know that they've done it before, and I think that you found that quite helpful, and it might be time to do it again.
Okay, right. Thank you. Mr. Boyce, you're speaking. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry to come back, Chair. If we are going to bring a Lightbulb person, the questions I've just said need to be answered. Otherwise, the liable person will be left exposed to a question they don't have the answer to, and I won't be very happy.
Okay. I think Mr. Thorpe may have the hint on that one. The question I've got to ask is, Mr. Hines is going to leave us shortly, and I think he's on the main board of Lightbulb. Do we know who his replacement's going to be, and any carryover from that? If Mr. Hines is still with us, I don't know if he is, or... Oh, he is, yes. He's on mute.
Sorry, it's muted automatically. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm still here. Mr. Thorpe has been on the board of Lightbulb for about the past 18 months alongside me, so there has been continuation to make sure there's cover.
Thank you. Any other questions at all?
Councillor Hack, Chair.
Mrs. Hack, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, I was going to ask a question regarding the allocation of the funding. So, Mr. Thorpe, you just alluded to that all the money that we give gets spent on in the borough. Just wanted to know, in chart 8, we've got the estimated value of work started and allocation. Is there a big gap between our funding allocation and the number of applications we are receiving, or Lightbulb is receiving in the borough?
My understanding is that the funding allocation that we receive is sufficient to cover the work on DFGs, and that there's some left over, which is why the Lightbulb partnership looks at bringing forward other projects as well. And I believe that that's a situation that's relevant to the borough, but also a situation that's relevant to other councils in the partnership.
Thank you. And just one more question. In terms of the reason for dropouts, there was one reason, unable, no, that one. I think it was regarding the contribution. The contribution is too high from the customer. What happens to those people? Are they left to their own devices, or do they get any help or signposted anywhere else? I'd like to know what happened to those people. Hope they're not just suffering without any help.
No, we discussed this, I think, in the last meeting, and I asked Lightbulb to provide some case studies to actually demonstrate what happens to people that drop out, and also to clarify, which they have done, that they do get additional support after they've dropped out. They don't just get there. I think that's in the action points from the last meeting. The case studies are still being put together, and we'll bring those to a future meeting. And actually, that might be a good time for a representative of Lightbulb to attend as well, and actually to talk us through those case studies.
And Mr. Thorpe, if you could ask them, there's a lot of acronyms in this report or appendix. So could they explain what they stand for as well? Some of them are quite obvious, but some of them are quite complicated.
Yes, I will do.
Okay, Mr. Lloydell, to see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just very quickly, mention the budget and allocations, etc., and the underspends were mentioned. I'm not quite sure how that works, but if there are underspends for this borough, does Lightbulb have carte blanche to do with what it likes, or does it actually come back and say to you, we've got this underspend, is there anything we can do with it? Thank you.
Mr. Thorpe knows that one.
Just to clarify, all projects arising from underspends are discussed and agreed by the board.
Okay. No further questions? Got somebody else hand up?
One hand raised, Chair, Councillor Lloydell.
Mr. Lloydell, yeah. You're muted.
Sorry, I've just loaded it. Sorry, I've asked my question. I forgot to lower my hand. I've done it now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else before we?
No further hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, as far as I'm aware, it's Mr. Hines' last meeting for this committee, so I'd like to thank Mr. Hines for the work he's done since he's been with us, and best of luck for the future. And also, it's the last meeting this year, this type of meeting. So on my behalf, thank you for supporting me for the last 12 months on this committee. And no doubt we shall meet in some form, somewhere, some other time. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.